Over a period of 9 months, we converted this once empty van into an off-grid tiny home. The van itself is a 2008 518 Mercedes Sprinter. We chose this van for the headroom that it offered, as well as the load length and the weight that it could carry. We started off by creating a scale model of our design using SketchUp. We started off the build by removing the old 9mm ply flooring that was in there. This was well past its best. Thankfully the flooring came up pretty easily and the condition of the subfloor underneath was pretty good as well. Gave that a quick clean and then just painted and prepped any surfaces that were exposed. Thankfully we could use the old floor as a bit of a template for our new floor. That saved us a whole heap of mucking around. Then we went about cutting out our new floor out of 15mm structural ply and we test fitted that before giving it a paint. Before we fixed the new floor in place, we laid down a layer of insulation. For this we used a closed cell foam with foil backing on either side, and then we fixed the new floor into place. With the new floor in place, we set about putting some additional sound deadening on the panels of the van. We then went on to making some awning brackets. I just made these out of some flat bar and welded them up, bolted them to the roof, and then attached the awning in place. It was then time to cut our first hole in the roof of the van. This one was for the max air fan. So we pulled that out, filed it down, painted all the metal edges, made a bit of a frame out of some plywood for the inside of the van, Sikaflexed the outside, fitted the frame for the max in, and then mounted our plywood frame up underneath and screwed the surrounding frame of the max fan down into place. Then it was just a matter of dropping the fan in and putting the screws in for that. Here we're preparing the gas storage box for installation. We started off by attaching the hinge to the lid and then the lid to the box. We also had to install the locking mechanism to the lid. Then we marked out on the side of the van where the box was going to go. We had to be really accurate with this because the box is moulded to fit the side of the van. Then through a combination of the angle grinder, jigsaw and multi-tool, we cut out the hole for the gas box. Gave it a quick file and paint, and then some sticker around the edges of where the box was going in and slid that into place. Moving over to the other side of the van, we're now marking out the spot where our gas hot water system is going to go. This was another big hole that we had to cut in the side of the van. This was a little bit easier after we'd already cut the gas box on the other side. Then it was just a matter of installing the hot water system in its place. This unit is an instant gas hot water unit, so it gives us hot water on demand. With the hot water system installed, we're moving on to installing the solar panels. For our solar system, we've got 3 200-watt solar panels, and these will power our off-grid system. Here we're just drilling a couple of holes for the cable entry gland and then feeding the cables through that gland and into the van. Moving inside the van, we put down our first layer of insulation, which was a closed cell foam with a reflective backing. We then installed all our 12 volt and 240 volt cabling throughout the whole van and installed our shore plug as well, which is where we'll be able to charge our batteries using the mains grid if we need to. Here we're installing rib nuts into the side of the van, so this will let us bolt directly into the van for our bed base. And then we went about cutting some ply battens out and putting down our next layer of insulation, which was another closed cell foam with reflective backing. With that done, we ran our bed rails through the thicknesser to give them a nice finish and went about cutting them to length. We drilled out the holes where the bolts will go through, and then we notched out the sections where the supporting rails will sit and hold the bed frame. Here we're just cutting the steel supports that will hold up the base of the bed itself. We're now just assembling our bench seat. This was something that I designed in SketchUp, so it was just a matter of cutting everything to length and assembling it. We then set about putting the finishing touches on the bed base, putting some ventilation holes in, painting everything and fixing it in place. Brooke finished off the bench seat by upholstering some foam and fabric to the seat itself. With the bed in place, we started framing out the shower. For the shower itself, we used a one-piece fiberglass shower unit that's made for the Sprinter, installed the ventilation pipes for the toilet. We carefully worked out where the drain had to be and drilled through with a hole saw for that.
and then kept framing out the other side of the shower so it was all held securely in place. With the shower securely in place, it was then time to install the drain into the floor of the shower. I then moved on to plumbing in the connection between the mixer and the shower head, drilled some more holes in our fiberglass shower. A little bit of a test fit here, and then I fixed the shower and mixer assembly to some supporting boards and then attached that to the back of the shower. We then installed the rest of the mixer assembly and fixed the shower bracket in place as well. For the front of the shower, we used an acrylic sheet which we siliconed in place and then framed in as well. We put a couple more holes in the shower unit for the LED lighting and the exhaust fan, and then fitted the exhaust fan off. We then fitted the door to the shower. For the shower door, we've gone with a retractable self-cleaning door. This was relatively easy to fit. It's also quite an efficient use of space as well, the way it retracts into itself. The last thing to finish off the bathroom is to install the toilet. For the toilet, we've gone with the Nature's Head composting toilet, so it's had to install the brackets that hold the toilet in place, fit the toilet, and connect up the vents. Before we continued with the rest of the fit out, we installed a diesel heater under the passenger's seat, drilled a couple of holes through the floor, cleaned those and painted them. We then dropped the fuel tank for the van so we could access the top of it. We undid this access hatch into the top of the tank, which houses the sender and fuel connections, and then drilled out the blank in the auxiliary fuel port and connected our line for the diesel heater into this. We then put everything back together and put the fuel tank back into the van, and then we installed the diesel heater unit itself. There was just a couple of nuts that held the heater in place, then we had to fit off the exhaust and the fresh air intake. We also had to connect that fuel line up into the diesel heater. We had to do a little bit of soldering for the fuel pump, and then we connected up all the cables for the heater. The next project we tackled was the bike storage tray, which will house our mountain bikes underneath the bed. So we made the frame out of some pine and then the base for that out of some 15mm ply, screwed and glued everything together. Quite a lot of the design for the van itself actually revolved around this bike storage tray and how we would fit the bikes in under our bed. Here we're installing the Rocky Mount front fork holders for the bikes, and then I used a pocket hole jig to drill pocket holes in the supporting rails that will sit either side of the tray. We were then able to drill screws through those pocket holes into the floor and install the sliding locking rails which holds the tray in place. The solar system was one of the biggest parts of the build. A lot of time and effort went into planning this out. So our system includes 400 amps of 12 volt lithium power, a 3 kilowatt inverter. We've also got a 50 amp DC-DC charger, a 60 amp MPPT solar charge controller, which is what's getting installed here. We then also installed some Bluetooth communications. Then we tackled the really big job of wiring everything together. A really big part of this is understanding what cable sizes you need, and this really depends around how many amps are running through those cables and how long the cable runs are. A lot of time also went into cutting, crimping and soldering the cables and fitting all the lugs and heat shrink and everything. Here I'm just fitting off some cables to the Victron Links distributor. This is effectively just a big bus bar or an extension of the battery terminals that also houses fuses. Here's a bit of a close-up showing what's involved in crimping off the cable ends, and then it was a matter of just fitting off all the different cables and connecting up all the different components. With most of the internal wiring done, it was then time to connect up the solar panels. I never connected these up before because I didn't want to create a live circuit. Flipped those on and tested them out, and the last thing to do was connect up the DC-DC charger to the van's starting battery. The next job we tackled was making our overhead storage cupboard. So we took some rough measurements, made a template out of some cardboard, and then traced that out onto a sheet of ply and cut all that out. We made the supporting brackets for the overhead shelf out of some flat bar, bent and welded those into the shapes that we needed. To make things a little easier on us, we used some existing mounting holes and made the brackets to fit those locations. Then we traced out the front of the cabinet and test fitted that. For the underside of the shelf, we used some upholstery fabric, glued that and then stapled it into place. Here I'm just cutting out the hole for the door that will sit in the front of the cabinet. We gave the front of the cabinet a lick of paint and then installed the cabinetry hardware and the hinges, then fitted that up and screwed it off, and then fitted off the last of the cabinetry hardware as well. We then tackled some more storage, so here we are building our bedside storage cabinet. This one also doubles as our bedside table. For this cabinet we used 12mm ply and we screwed and glued everything together with wood glue. The cabinetry got a coat of paint to match the colour scheme of the rest of the van. The lid of the cabinet got a stain varnish which will match the table and bench in the van, and then I used some pocket holes to attach that to the top of the cabinet. We then started building the kitchen. So for half of the kitchen we made use of IKEA flat pack cabinetry. This is a really easy way to build out the kitchen and it saves a lot of time and hassle building drawers and door fronts. The kicker is what supports the cabinetry from underneath. We custom built ours out of 12mm ply. We also opted to make use of that space under the cabinet and built a storage drawer into the kicker. On the right hand side of the kicker we built a channel, and that's where we fitted the vent and the ducting from the diesel heater. The other half of the cabinetry had to house our fridge, so we had to custom build this. We used 12mm marine grade ply with an AA grade finish to give us the best finish on the cabinetry. Then we used pocket holes and glued and screwed everything together. Here I'm just mounting the drawer slides and the drawer into that kicker. The kicker drawer was designed to hold food and particularly to store cans, so we were glad to see that that worked really well. Here we're just finishing off the cabinetry door on the custom cabinet we built using some inset hinges, so this door will be accessible from the outside of the van from the second sliding door. With the custom cabinetry all finished, we then gave it all a coat of paint. And for the section of the cabinet that will be visible next to those IKEA cabinets, we colour matched the grey so that it all ties in nicely. We then fitted these RV Labs latches which will keep the drawers and doors from opening while we're driving, fixed the heater ducting in place, secured the kicker in place using pocket holes, and then secured the rest of the cabinetry to the framing in the van. For our bench top we're using a beech timber bench top, so cut that to length and then cut some backing board support as well. We traced out the location for the sink, drilled out the corners, and then cut the hole for the sink using a jigsaw. We drilled out the hole for the tap using a Forstner bit, and then we cut out the hole for the stovetop. Here I'm just drilling and routing out the grooves where the bench joiners will go to join the benches, and then I routed out a groove along the underside of the bench, which is where we'll put an LED light strip. With all that done, it was then time to glue and join the bench top together using the bench joiners. We then gave the bench top a thorough sand down, starting with 120 grit, working our way up to 400 grit, and stained and varnished the bench top. We then screwed the bench top into place and then installed the LED strip into the groove that I'd routed earlier. We decided to put a featured tile splashback in with the emerald green matching the green of our seat. We used a super flexible and strong tile adhesive to hold these tiles in place, and then grouted everything and wiped that off. Soldered up the LED strip under the bench. We then fitted off the tap and installed the sink in place. We installed some shelving into the back of the custom cabinetry, fitted off the face of the cabinet and installed the door as well. It was then time to install the water tanks into the van. We've got around 200 litres of fresh water and 50 litres of grey water. We're mounting 3 tanks under the van, so 2 freshwater tanks and a grey water tank, and we're also mounting 1 tank inside the van. For the tank framing, I'm using 40 by 5 by 5mm angle to make up the base of the frame and the supports as well. We then did a dry test fit of the tanks under the van and drilled and installed rib nuts in so we could secure the tanks in with bolts. All of the frames got coated with a grey primer and then finished in satin black. We then fitted the tanks into the frames, and then the frames got mounted up under the van and bolted into place. We then moved on to the plumbing. For all of our plumbing we used 12mm John Guest pipes and fittings. Installed a water filter and purifier. These fittings are really easy to work with, they just push together and they have a little locking tab that goes in place. Here we're installing our freshwater fill point. This will let us fill our 3 freshwater tanks, and it will also let us bypass those tanks if we are connected to mains. We can just run all our plumbing off a hose. We fitted water tank sensors and then tested everything was working before we moved on to the grey water plumbing. For the grey water plumbing we used 40mm PVC piping and 40mm flexible marine pipe as well. With the plumbing all done, we then moved on to building our slide out table. We used a sheet of pine for the tabletop, sanded and put all that together and gave it a stain the same as the bedside tables and the kitchen countertop. We then mounted some locking drawer slides to some supporting rails and then to the table, and then we secured that under the bed. Here we're installing the interior cladding, so for this we're using pine shiplap. It all just slots together nicely and gives quite a nice finish. We pre-drilled all the spots where our downlights were going and pulled the cables through there so we can install those later. We filled all the screw holes with a wood filler, sanded it all back, and then everything got a coat of paint. I have to say I feel like this was one of the most satisfying points in the build where it really felt like everything was coming together. We installed all the utility switches and controls in the kitchen, and then we installed all of the downlights. For this we soldered them all in and then used heat shrink over the joints. We then started on all the finishing touches of the van, so we put final floor planks down. We trimmed off all of the corners and exposed edges with PVC angle, labelled all our switches, installed aluminium angle around the step into the van, and put a couple of little decorations in. We hope you enjoyed watching this build, and if you want to see more, definitely make sure to check out our van tour.